in the spring of 2013, I happened to be on a retreat, a silent retreat, where I met our next speaker. I was introduced to her and said, go and talk to this lady over there. She's getting very involved in pro-life things. I think you'll like her. And I did very much. And that's where I first met Obianuju Ekeocha, Uju for short. And just to tell you a little bit about Uju, who I hope will start making her way towards the platform. Uju is Nigerian, and she works as a biomedical scientist in the National Health Service. She lives in the UK, but also spends a lot of time in Nigeria as well. And the story of Uju and Culture of Life Africa, which is her organisation, started in the summer of 2012 when she turned on her television set and saw David Cameron and Melinda Gates, who's married to Bill Gates, the richest man in the world, and the pair of them pledging billions of dollars to deluge the world's poorest countries, many of which are in Africa, with contraception and abortion. And Uju was looking at this thinking, this isn't right, and sat up all night writing an open letter to Melinda Gates, putting her straight on what African women really need and want, which is not contraception and abortion. The letter went viral, and out of that was born Culture of Life Africa. And Uju has organised 2 conferences in Nigeria. And the conference in Abuja, the capital of Nigeria, this year, 2014, a team of 4 people, including myself, went to speak at the conference, and it was, without a doubt, one of the highlights of my entire pro-life career. Absolutely amazing. So I'm really thrilled and delighted that Uju has made it to this conference and getting us off to this wonderful start. And she's going to talk about the clash of the cultures, keeping Africa pro-life in the rising tide of pro-abortion ideology. Uju.
Good evening to everybody, and I must thank you and thank SPUC in a very special way for inviting me to this conference and for giving me the opportunity to share this message with you, because obviously I know this is something that you have been doing for a number of years. SPUC, when I started pro-life work, I came across SPUC, and what I noticed first about your organization is just how dedicated and just how amazing your pro-life advocacy was. There are some other organizations that I've come across as well, but not a lot of organizations are interested in the African narrative and the reality of pro-life struggle in Africa. But SPUC has been a great blessing to me. Antonia has been amazing. Of course, he says a lot about women who went for a silent retreat to pray. And then we chatted during that. Oh dear. But that was the beginning of my encounter with SPUC and collaboration with SPUC. But also, in a very special way, it was the beginning of a very special friendship for myself, because Antonia has become a personal friend to me. So I'm just going to go through this talk, and I think I must introduce myself first and foremost. Obviously, as she said, my name is Obianuju Ekeocha, and I'm originally from Nigeria. I have lived in the UK for 9 years. I am the 6th child of a wonderful couple who's still alive in Nigeria, and have a lot of brothers and sisters, as one can imagine. So I am a biomedical scientist by training. I didn't start off to become a pro-life advocate, but of course, God has plans for everybody, as Ayo said. And this is exactly my story, but not just my story, but just the reality of Africa and how the 2 cultures have clashed, the African culture and the Western culture. So I hope I can make this work. So in 2012, Melinda Gates, with the great support of the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, David Cameron, launched this big contraception campaign, where she launched it, even though she's American. I don't know how it happened, but she came to launch it at the Family Planning Summit in London. I didn't hear about it until the day, as God will have it, I turned on my television set and saw it. Now, they were trying to raise money, as Antonia said, but in effect, what would the contraception do? I mean, she said she had the good of the poor at heart, and she had only good intentions. But the reality, from an African perspective, because I grew up in Africa and I've only been here for 9 years. I'm 34, so you can do the math. She was going to start off a culture of contraception for the African people. A disclosure here, we do know about contraception in Africa. There is contraception in Africa, and some people use it, but it is not, the prevalence rate of usage, or the usage rate, is nowhere compared to what you have in maybe some of the other Western countries, the UK, America. So she was going to start off a culture of contraception. She was going to distort the understanding of human sexuality as we had been trained, and as most Africans would understand human sexuality. She was going to depreciate the value of motherhood. In Africa, when a baby is born, there's so much rejoicing. You cannot imagine. It's not just for the parents, but the entire village rejoices. People dance. People come out and celebrate a baby, no matter how poor or rich. But there is something about motherhood and something about a newborn baby in Africa which that was going to change, if to the degree of what she was planning for us. Now, she was going to de-emphasize marriage as well, because obviously where there is contraception, there is a lot of sex happening outside the bond of marriage. And what will happen with the African youth? And let me say this, as a child raised in Africa, we are raised, and any African here can confirm that, we are raised with a hope of getting married. We are raised with a good appreciation of marriage. Nobody, apart from those who eventually go into, say, a Catholic priesthood or religious life, we're raised with a healthy view of marriage, and people aspire to marriage, irrespective of their situation. Even in the midst of difficulties, we are raised for marriage in Africa. So she was going to bring something that was going to de-emphasize that. And she was going to spread the ideology of feminism, that women are autonomous and it's just you, individual, and just do what you like, when you want it, how you want it, and get your contraception and make your life happen as you want it. But that was also one thing. She was going to also inadvertently unleash the culture of abortion. I know a lot of you, most of you are in pro-life world, so not too long ago she did make some statements to say that they were not supporting abortion, and they are, against abortion, and they're trying to separate themselves from the whole abortion issue. But with a contraception campaign this big, it was going to happen anyway, where you're trying, by all means, to tell the African people about stopping conception. By all means, if it fails, then what happens? There has to always be abortion as a safety net. So that scared me. That really, really scared me. And at the time I was doing a lot of research in something else, in blood transfusion. But I was quite accustomed at the time to writing different articles for the blood transfusion research that I was doing. So I sat up that night and I just wrote this open letter which went viral. But of course, with everything that goes viral, there were a lot of people who were saying bad things about it as well in the blogosphere. And I had to engage in a lot of debates, and I had to engage in a lot of arguments on the internet and in the comment box. A lot of you might know, for the young ones, you might know what I'm talking about, where people insult you and say, oh yeah, you want all African people to die, and you want African women to die, and you have to go to the comment box and try to save yourself or try to defend your point of view. So I did a lot of that, and I had to do a lot of studying, because I then realized, with so much challenge and so much pro-abortion women coming after me with their ideology and with their own arguments, I had to go and study what the real policies say, what are the abortion laws in Africa, what are the kind of things what is obtainable, some of the statistics, what is out there. So I did lots of studying, what is the United Nations saying? You know, all these things were things that plagued me. So I was absolutely ignorant up until 2012 about pro-life and pro-abortion battle. So this is how I got here. A year and a half later, can't believe it. But then I started this blog, cultureoflifeafrica.com. I had to start an organization. It all launched February 8th, 2013. So the objectives is just to promote, to preserve, to propagate the gospel of life, to tell the world about African people, what the African people really believe, what they want, what the situation in Africa is. You don't just bring in a gift when you don't know how it's going to destabilize the dynamics of the people without any regard for the values and views of the people. So this is the situation. Now, abortion laws in Africa. Let me tell you a little bit about the abortion laws in Africa. Abortion on demand, there's only 4 countries in Africa that have abortion on demand. But even 4 is too many. 4 is 4 too many. And you know that because you have been in this fight. South Africa has abortion, Tunisia, Ethiopia, and one tiny little silly country, Guinea-Bissau, where they do have abortion. I still can't believe it's just teeny tiny country. Why they have abortion on demand, I don't know. But these are the places where we have abortion on demand. We pray that comes to an end. So maybe when you pray, people of faith, that you remember these countries. Abortion is illegal, therefore, in 42 countries. Africa has 53 countries. So there are some countries in the middle where they're still playing a lot of word games, places like Kenya, where they're using issues like women's health to justify abortion or to make it legal. Places like even Ghana, you know, there are some exceptions. So we pray for those countries. This makes it 80% of Africa is still pro-life, which is I think a victory story, which is a victorious statement for the organizations that are trying so hard to clamp us and to tie us to their ideology of abortion. So it's 80%. If you meet any pro-abortion person telling you about Africa, you say, no, it's 80%, because I was at a conference and an African woman came and said, 80% of Africa says abortion is illegal. So, but all is not silent in pro-life Africa. The pro-abortion people never sleep. They don't sleep at night. I don't know what they do, but they don't sleep. They don't eat. All they think about is abortion. I don't know how clear this is. This is quite faint, but I'm going to read it for you. This is actually quite funny. I'll tell you a little bit about this. This is a scanned copy of a page of a bill, an anti-violence bill for women, something that has to do with protection of women. It was passed in Imo State, which is my own little state. It's a sovereign state. So because Nigeria operates in states, that means that, yes, governors, like in America in a way, governors can pass laws, okay? So he passed this law without anybody knowing about it, because Africa is like that. He passed it in secret, May of last year. One of the conferences Antonia talked about, we came in June and we had a pro-life conference, and we were trying to inspire everybody and say, oh, please, let's all be pro-life, let's keep our laws pro-life. The governor sent somebody to our conference and he spoke great pro-life talk, but he had already passed this law and it was hidden in his secretariat. A very courageous pro-life advocate called Prince Njamanze, he's my prince, okay, he's the prince of our little town. He sent somebody and they snuck in there, made a photocopy. He could have been killed for this. Okay, they made a photocopy of this bill and they brought it out, and 54 pages. So this is a page of interest, and these underlined 4 lines is the most important thing in the whole 54 pages. Tucked in there, what it says is, every woman shall have the right to enjoy reproductive rights, including the right to medical abortion, in cases of sexual assault, rape, incest, and where the continued pregnancy endangers the life or the physical, mental, psychological, and emotional health of the woman. this looks like something from a Planned Parenthood guideline book. It has nothing to do with my people. Even my governor might not have known what was in the 54 pages, but they just wrote it and gave to him. And that's why it's so dangerous, and that's why I pray that the international pro-life world would look kindly at Africa, because we are in a difficult situation. Our leaders are not all that educated, and sometimes things like this pass through them, and he signed this, passed it in secret, kept it in the government house until Prince Njamanza brought this out and spread it, leaked it to the press. Now, my Archbishop Adjobubinna fought a great battle over this. And within a week, I tell you, what happened has never happened before. Oh yes, the Catholic Church fought this with a lot of other Christian denominations, and in 7 days, the governor, because of how organized people were and how assertive people were, he abrogated this law and made a public apology. He actually apologized to the church for passing this law. It has never happened. So yes, Africa can be kept pro-life because our politicians are still very much afraid of the church, and they're very much afraid of what people will think of them if they turn against the church. So this has happened, but it will happen again, because someone wrote this and brought it to our governor, and those are the people who never sleep. So wherever we have legal abortion, so in those 4 countries, particularly South Africa, because that's the biggest, and I know a lot of people in South Africa, these are the things that happen. There's always coercion. There's always coercion. Women are coerced into abortion. There is a lot of abortion-related trauma that nobody cares about. There is a lot of sexual violence. There is gross medical malpractice. There is dissidence in religious practice. There is a terrible suppression of objectors. So if you're a religious objector, actually a friend of mine who is a superior at a religious congregation in Durban, in South Africa, she said to me that some of her sisters, the young women coming up in the congregation who are nurses, had to go into some South African hospitals to get training as nurses. You will not believe that women in veil, reverend sisters, religious sisters, were not exempt from abortion training. So a lot of them have had to leave the medical field, because if you do not exempt a religious sister in full habit from training in abortion, I don't know who else will be exempt. So, but that is Africa. Wherever there is suppression, there is a lot of suppression. So South Africa has bought into the lie, and they are sitting on it. There is also weakening of marriage and family culture. There is a little link here, which I've just written here, the corruption of South African youth. So just for you to see, I don't know if it's going to play out, try it. If it doesn't, well, forgive me. But it's just for you to see how abortion can change the core values of the African people. Like, if in South Africa, a lot of the African youth are the same, we're all raised for the same thing, and we're all raised thinking the same thing, but if an African youth can think of abortion this way, then all things are possible. Sorry, I'm going to make this not work now. In here, because I talk a lot, so I could just explain to you. So this young girl is 19 years old, she's South African, and this is a video that was actually made by Marie Stopes International, the enemies. They're killing babies in Africa, I tell you, those people. Anyway, so they made this video to show all about the unsafe abortion and what it does to women. Mind you, abortion is legal in South Africa, so I don't even understand why they had to use this South African girl to show how bad it is. But she had an abortion at the age of 19, and it was just the way she talked about it. She said, oh, I and my boyfriend, I was pregnant and I just went to make an abortion and I wasn't ready for the baby, and I went here and this happened to me and that happened to me, and eventually my mother helped me. It's just so sad. The first day I watched it, I wept because I couldn't reconcile with it. This is what a lot of girls have been turned into in South Africa. There is so much violence against women Who hasn't heard of the rape cases in South Africa? That something like 1 in every 4 women get raped in their lifetime. It is pathetic out there, and it has actually worsened since the abortion law was passed in 1997, unfortunately under the leadership of President Mandela. It was passed and pushed by a woman, Dlamini Zuma, whose ex-husband is now the president of South Africa. So these people have a stronghold where they have a stronghold. And only a few weeks ago, since 1997, she passed this law and she made it happen as the Minister for Health in South Africa. But a few weeks ago, she was at one of these pro-abortion meetings or conferences, and she kept saying, no, we still have to make abortion more accessible to women. In South Africa, 1 million babies have already died legally, and I think that is a shame for any country. But for an African country, it's even more of a shame, because it is not only against the humanity of just taking away the humanity of a child or denying the humanity of a child, but also you have to come against the African value, which is all about life, which is all about defending life before you get to that stage. But these people are wealthy and they are pushing it. So, but anyway, I'll just go back to the presentation, and do forgive me. So, this is the reality of abortion in Africa. Because people still say, yes, even though it's only 4 countries that have legal abortion, but yes, there is abortion in Nigeria, there is abortion in Cameroon, there is abortion in all the countries. And so people go behind in the back alleys and the, the pro-abortion people paint this horrible picture where women are suffering because their abortion is being the abortion is being done by people who are not medical professionals, and so this happens to them and that happens to them, and they chalk out these horrible figures and tell us how many thousands of women dying. But I'll tell you the truth. Because I grew up as a girl in Africa, and I grew up as a woman in Africa, and I went to university, and I happen to know some girls who did have abortions, unfortunately. But there's a lot of male dominance in Africa. So most times, in the majority of the cases, the girls don't decide. The men decide that they want the abortion to happen. They pay for it. We have healthcare systems that are heavily influenced by the West. Where are our medical books written? They're written in the UK, in the US. All our doctors, even though they're Nigerian trained or they're African trained, but they're looking to the West, you see, to get the medical advancement. So if medical advancement means abortion, then they put it into their practice as part of the practice. We have underpaid healthcare workers. A lot of the medical staff are not happy. I worked in a hospital. I was working as a medical laboratory scientist at one of the biggest hospitals in Nigeria before I left and came to this country in 2006. And people are not happy. They feel they could get paid more. So they stay there and they look for a way out or the way to make quick money. There is inadequacy as well in crisis pregnancy care. Only when I came out did I hear that there were people who actually take care of women who are pregnant or who have crisis pregnancy. It's not very prevalent. Yes, we have a lot of family support in some cases, but sometimes also girls run into big problems when they get pregnant, that they cannot take care of the babies and they feel that this is their only choice. But we know that, of course, abortion is their own choice. It's not a choice at all. There is inadequacy in the enforcement of abortion restrictions by the governments who should enforce it because they're so corrupt. And this is how illegal abortions happen. So who actually does the abortions? It's not the untrained nursing assistant who has a horrible looking abortion clinic behind her house. It's doctors, gynecologists, people who should take care of women. They are the ones who know how to do abortion, and in most cases, they are the ones who actually perform these abortions on women. So that abortion should be made legal in African countries so that women can be safe. It's already being done by doctors anyway. So if they're going to die there, I mean, they're going to die, because abortion is a very dangerous procedure and should not be pushed on any country, shouldn't be encouraged. So the pressure from the international organizations and the countries, you know, the Western countries, the UK, the US, continues to mount. Because as long as they have decided to deny the humanity of the unborn child, yes, they will make sure that other people see their point of view, because there is an indictment on the UK as long as the Nigerian people keep saying, oh no, we believe that there is life even in the womb. And then you're there killing your own children in the UK. So they continue to push. And these are some organizations that are making a lot of stride in Africa. They are putting in a lot of money. You have your own organization that we pay for in this country, the DFI, the Department for International Development. It's part of, I believe, a part of the government establishment here in this country. One of their leaders is Lynn Featherstone, whom I happen to have the pleasure to see at the United Nations. We went for, earlier this year, it was at the United Nations, and John was so gracious. He invited me to the UN, and I was there with Patrick and Peter Smith, who work for SPUC. And I had the pleasure, well, the unpleasure, the displeasure of going to this side event where they were talking about abortion. And who did I see? Lynn Featherstone talking about abortion, pushing her abortion ideology, speaking in her very British accent and telling people how abortion is a public health issue and it's a moral issue, and women are being denied their dignity when people just let them be like that without giving them their reproductive rights. So they pay for this thing called the Safer Abortion Action Fund, which is a terrible thing I wrote about sometime early last year. It's a project, it's a funding stream that where the UK and some other countries pull their money together and pay only to lobby. The only reason why the SPUC project exists is to wake up every morning to lobby African leaders to make sure that the abortion policy is being passed in different countries, or at least the ideology is being furthered every day. And not too long ago, the UK actually increased their budget for it. They increased the money they gave. If you can read my blog. Maybe I'll give you some of those at the end if anybody's interested. But the UK actually decided we're going to put, I think, an extra $1 million just to make it possible for girls to have access to abortion. So it's a terrible thing, and the UK is directly paying for it. The US has a more tricky way of dealing with their own abortion in terms of foreign policy. They don't pay directly for abortion, but they support organizations like Planned Parenthood, of course, who are terrible abortion giants. But they're also pushing a lot of contraception. They're pushing the sex ed, the sex education, the so-called comprehensive sexuality education, which is morally objective at best. Okay, so they push it on the African children. IPPF is there as well as a big organization funded by Americans and all the other countries who give them money. Maristos International, I believe, is one of yours as well. It's from the UK here. They are killing up to 37,000 South African babies every year. That's one of the most recent numbers. And South Africa is a big country, but 37,000 abortions by one organization in Africa. They are shedding a lot of blood among my people, and that is terribly offensive. So Amnesty International, they're also there pushing their own ideology. IPAS is an organization, unfortunately, not many people have heard about them because they don't own abortion facilities, but what they do is they train lobbyists. They train people who know how to approach the African leaders, who know how to talk to them and how to sell the whole abortion ideology to them. So IPAS is one organization, as well as an American from North Carolina, but they have a lot of stronghold in Africa. These are some of the strategies that they are using. These are not our strategies. This is this one will be their strategy. This is what they're using to move the terrible, distorted view of life and sexuality. They're reframing the issue. They come in and they tell our leaders who don't know any better that this is a public health concern. They are using questionable statistics. Who hasn't heard the 47,000 women who die every year of abortion? I don't know where they got those numbers. We are not counting numbers in Africa. How did they get them? If they're illegal abortion, how do they know? Who's telling them? The World Health Organization is chunking out these numbers. I would not go as far as saying they are wrong, but I say they're questionable. I have worked a lot in research, and I have worked a lot in science, medical science and healthcare science, that the numbers, it's really difficult to tell what is unplanned pregnancy in Africa. I'll tell you an example. We have a lot of languages, like tribal. I speak English a little bit. I'm not that good, but in Africa we have people who speak different dialects. And even that I say this is an unplanned pregnancy, it's hard for me to say it in my language, you see, because we don't have words for it. So who's telling you that these are 220 million women are having unplanned pregnancies every year? Who told you? In what language did they tell you? And how did your scientists do tell? How did they come about this information? You have to do questionnaires. For women who don't read and write, who said so? So they're questionable, my people. And you tell them, when you have your pro-abortion friends, you ask them, okay, so what happens with the African people who have their tribal language? Are they counted in your numbers? How do you know their pregnancy is unplanned? In what language did you ask it? So these are reasons why I say, if they're going to base their foreign policy and countries, I mean, I'll show you a quote later in the talk, but these are all based on these numbers that I don't know who brought them out. But anyway, they're lobbying our African leaders who are not educated, who don't know any better, who are corrupt. And they're campaigning at the UN, they're campaigning at the EU, other international forums. I know Patrick will talk more on that and shed more light on that, but these people are fearless, and they're ruthless, and they're fighting every day to make this thing happen, to get abortion to be global. They also have a lot of intense media campaign. But one of the most painful things for me, like that video which didn't work, sorry, it's the re-education of our African youth. You would see some of that now. Now here are two pictures, and they drive me crazy. Sorry, I'm a bit hot-tempered. But the one on the left is a tweet message from a girl, this lady called Kathy Northcott. I follow her on Twitter because she's an American girl who has gone to settle in Burkina Faso, a West African country. Hope she doesn't get Ebola virus. But anyway, she's settled there, and she's there as American Corps, but I don't know what American Corps is supposed to do. They're supposed to be the American Peace Corps. I thought they're supposed to be peacekeeping. But what this girl does all the time is to do a lot of outreach with sexual education and all those kind of things. And then she posts the pictures. And a lot of it, I don't know if it's possible. You know, I just keep wondering. I wonder if we can actually approach American Peace Corps and ask them, are they supposed to be doing this? She's training girls. You can see these are young girls, very young girls, maybe 15 years barely. And she said, Mary Stopes provided examples of available contraception to show students, like the implant. And you can see this girl, it's very clear, but she's holding like an implant, and they're showing them how it's done. And this is terribly offensive, because I know in the UK you shouldn't be able to talk to children in schools or get access to students without their parents knowing what's being taught to them. So this girl goes into schools and she's talking about contraception and sex and condoms to students, adolescent kids. That Mary Stopes International is there, they're providing all the materials. And African parents who are, this is terrible, but the African parents who know nothing about this, when they send their kids off to school to get an education that will help them out of poverty. And this is what is taught to them in schools. The other one is the Condomize Project, the one on the right. And you may not be able to see it, but there are logos down there of who has sponsored it. The Condomize Project is this project because the name tells the story. But this was held not too long ago, actually, just a few weeks back. in Swaziland, I believe, just a very tiny country, the size of 3 UK counties. I checked that. So, but they're sharing condoms, and who sponsored it is IBPF, but with also United Nations, the UNFPA. So this is what they're doing in Africa to help us out of poverty. I don't think so. Now, they disregard our views and values. They disrespect us. They disrespect our parents. This little boy has been given a placard to hold during the Amnesty International campaign. What do they call it? It's the My Body campaign. It's all about reproductive rights. It's an ugly campaign. Don't check it on the internet. But he's holding, this is in Togo, and this is a photo op done with this little boy who doesn't even know what he's holding. Probably his parents might not be able to read what he's holding, but I tell you what it says. It says, "C'est votre corps, connaissez vos droits." Okay? I speak a bit of French. So it's your right, it's your body, know your rights. So this is all about, then when you read it, it's all about, it's all about sex. And what happens with the body? It's ridiculous. And they go into schools and they put a pen. You can see the pen they put on that thing like it's an educational material. Maybe that's what they tell the parents who can't read. They say, look, there's a pen there. It's all about education. But if you read it, it's all about the My Body campaign, which is disgusting. But nobody to fight this. The Africans are not able to fight this. So this is why I had to put my time to it. So this is another one. They're flooding us in Swaziland, the same condomized project. In one single party, one social event, the United Nations managed to share 118,800 condoms distributed at one single event. In Swaziland, as I said, a country the size of just 3 counties, 3 UK counties, in one event, should not happen. This one, I shouldn't have called it a re-education, I should have just called it empty promises. This is a word cloud, again, that was very smart, done by IBPF, United Nations, and I don't know, 2 other reproductive rights maniacs. But anyway, you can see what is written. It's a word cloud. So I keep thinking, why can't pro-life people be this trendy, right? You can see it's a tie. So it's a word cloud done for African youth who want to be trendy and who want to be Western, they want to be like you. But what it says, if you read the word cloud, is you can drive your own car, you can own your own house, have the money and the happiness you want, make your dreams come true. There was one I removed because I didn't have enough space on this page. It says you can go on holidays, which is something in Africa. You can go abroad on holidays, so exotic. Anyway, be your own man. Make your own rules. Be the man that uses condoms all the time. Support your woman, not your wife, but your woman, to take the pill, injection, implant loop, to not have the baby, the child you are not ready for and do not want. These are the things they're telling our young men who should be thinking about marriage, it's all about, tell your woman. So this gives them the impetus to be even more abusive. So they're telling, oh, support your woman. That means just beat her up and make sure she uses one of these things. So, and it's IBPF. Now this one is the woman that Antonia had brought to my attention. This happened in the House of Lords, where they gave, it was the House of Commons, House of Lords. So Baroness, the Baroness of Kennington, this is Jenkins, what's her name? Jenkins. So she said, I'm sorry, this is so wordy, I don't like wordy PowerPoint, but I had to capture the whole quote. This woman stood right in front of the House of Lords, and this was what she said about African women. That's women like me. She says, another major barrier to women entering the workforce in the developing world is a lack of choice over their sexual and reproductive health and access to contraception. Nearly 15 years after the introduction of MDGs, as the Millennium Development Goals, we are still way behind on some of the targets. On the International Women's Day on Saturday, 800 women will die from the causes relating to pregnancy and childbirth. So does she not want us to have babies so that we don't die? I don't know. 128 women will die from an unsafe abortion. 222 million women will still have a met need for family planning. This was that thing I was saying. So if I was there, I'll be asking her in my native tongue, first of all, who told you? I mean, who gave her these numbers? Where did she get it from? But they keep chunking out these numbers and they keep throwing it out at the House of Lords, and it looks so important. So anyway, she goes ahead to say, if we continue at the current rate of expansion, it will take another 500 years for women in parts of I come from West Africa, West and Central Africa, to access contraception they want. This is not only morally wrong, but also it has a massive economic impact.